Hello. This is a new video, and we are going to dive right into the patch notes, both the 8.5 bonus update, which will come out in just a few days here, actually, I believe it's the 1st, as well as the actual update itself. Now, a couple notes about this patch overall. It's mostly, almost entirely, in meaningful changes anyway, item changes. Now, that might get people's hopes up, but unfortunately, or fortunately, there are absolutely zero crit nerfs and only very slight buffs to separate build paths specifically for hunters. There's no alternate defense for crit, there's no crit adjustment, there's no crit item price increase, nothing like that. There is only a slight tangential nerf to crit later on, but I know that's going to be a contention for everybody in the community. I haven't even looked on Twitter, but I already know 80% of, I was going to say the pro scene, but the entire Smite scene are going to be up in arms that in neither the bonus update or the actual patch, crit isn't touched at all. Actually, that's a lie. There is one character in particular whose crit gets ever so slightly touched, but we'll get to that later. So first for the balance update, as it says, June 1st, just in a few days here. The very first change, I already, thanks, I hate it. Um, so enhanced purple buff. Now, if you don't play Smite, which if you're on my channel you don't play Smite, you're a goober, first of all. Secondly, enhanced buffs, if you don't know, even if you do play Smite, a lot of people don't actually know what the enhanced buffs do, even though it's a pretty core mechanic with the greater scorpions and whatnot. All four buffs have their base state and their enhanced state. Now, how it is that for 2.5 of those buffs, uh, it's in being an enhanced version is really good. Those two being blue buff and purple buff. Speed buff is, it's meh. It's an okay increase. Uh, but red buff is just the enhanced version is completely worthless unless you are going a full lifesteal Typhon's build or you're Anubis. So high-res have known this. People have complained about this forever, that the upgrade to speed is extremely underwhelming, and the upgrade to red is nigh to useless, but the upgrades to purple and blue are really good, like crazy good. It doubles the CDR you get from blue buff from 10% to 20%, and it also more than doubles, as we see here, the attack speed on purple buff, which is crazy. It takes purple buff from honestly a bad buff that's not even worth picking up to absolutely crazy 25% attack speed buff that is it's an item in and of itself. So high res, look at that, and instead of going, well, two of the enhanced buffs are really good. One of them is okay and one of them is trash. Instead of maybe bringing up the trash one to be okay or bringing up the trash and okay one to be good, they're instead nerfing one of the good ones. Agree, it's only 5%, and it makes it closer to each other, I guess mirroring the buff it gets from blue buff gets from being enhanced, but just the logic here is questionable. Now here we go. Here's the tangential change that slightly affects crit. Now the reason why everyone is going crit is because of one item, one singular item. Crit itself has not been changed for a very long time. I think the last crit change we actually had was in like 8.2. I think it was the rage. Rage cost was decreased or something like that. And then before that, it was a while ago when percent pen was added back in, and Wind Demon actually got percent pen added onto it, which was a huge thing back then, but nobody bothered because people don't know how numbers work. But anyway, the problem with this item, because when Gilded Arrow first came out, almost no one got it. People got it for the Gilded Arrow, like the gold ramp up. Why people get it now is because Ornate Arrow gives you crazy stats. It gives you basic attack power, which is already good for crit. It's not really good for anything else, basic attacks. It gives you crazy amounts of attack speed and crit based on your gold, but even when it just did that, very few people got it on very few characters. You would only ever see it on like a Chernabog or a Rom. And that would be say, Barracuda uploading, you can in fact go this item. It wasn't by any means standard. But then for some reason, the items being fine, just slightly undervalued, honestly, which the items are just fine as they were, they decided to add base stats to the item, which just made it crazy good. The item gives like 30% attack speed and 25% crit chance when it's fully stacked, which when you're level 20 is going to be very quickly anyway. Honestly, the whole gold increase at level 5 doesn't matter. You're already close to full build. All it does, I mean, we'll get to Diamond Arrow. Diamond Arrow did not need this change. Nobody gets Diamond Arrow except magical characters. And even then, if you're a magical character and you went Gilded Arrow and you hit level 20, you're shame purchasing this Diamond Arrow to go, well, I don't want to be level 20 without upgrading my starter, but my starter sucks for my class, so that sucks. Diamond Arrow needs love. It definitely needs love. But the gold increase once you're level 20 helps you with maybe one item, and gets you a little bit faster to selling boots for a speed pod. People over exaggerate the gold you get from Ornate Arrow all the time, and it's actually kind of frustrating to talk about. But anyway, this is the route that they're trying to take. The 10 to 7, I can definitely see that, and this is just the same passive but on everything you kill, so it makes sense that it makes somewhat sense that they're going to do the same thing. But the Ornate change, this might as well not even be on the item anymore. A 5% gold increase, unless they make it like Benevolence and give it a minimum gold increase of +1. This means nothing on almost everything you do. So I don't know, kind of nuts. Anyway, moving on. Executioner, 5% attack speed off. Executioner is pretty bloated. But I don't think it's that OP. It's only really gotten this popular in crit builds because it's the only pen you can afford besides Wind Demon. And if you only have one item for pen that you can afford in your build because you need boots and you need devos and you need 2 to 3 crit items, Executioner is just obviously the way to go. So another tangential crit nerf, but not really. Executioner is also built in other builds and by other characters, but it's only 5% anyway. It's not really that big of a deal. Moving on to Atalanta's Bow, a whole 10 power added to it. Now, this item used to be crazy good when it gave 20% pen. Just the stats on it were nuts. But then they kept it at 20%, but then gave it next to no power, which they thought was balanced. It ended up still not being balanced because it's a 20% pen item and gives crazy attack speed. Then they cut the pen in half, but kept the power low. And the passive is terrible. Well, the passive isn't terrible. The passive also gives 20% attack speed when you get a killer assist, which is pretty decent. But other items just give way more for less, so Atalanta's kind of falls off. But now that it gives 35 power, it's actually in contention with items like Oboe or Ikaval. So yeah, I think... I mean, even I built this in certain builds on certain characters. After you sell boots, of course. It's not good enough to be a core item on anyone, but if you're looking for an attack speed pen option that isn't Executioner, or you already have Executioner and you want to sell boots, you don't want to lose attack speed when you have attack speed boots, Atalanta's is good. Aussie gets 5 power. This means literally nothing. You don't buy this item for power. This doesn't make any sense. It does sort of make sense. Instead of nerfing crit, they want to buff the non-crit build. You will also see Death Toll gets a small buff later on, and they're buffing Atalanta's and Aussie. And in the actual update patch, or in the bonus, I can't remember, they also end up buffing Transcendence by a decent amount too. So their approach to it is, instead of nerfing crit, they want to up the other ADC build to the level that crit is to show people, hey, now it's not actually OP, which I actually kind of like. I would like a more in-between approach, but this is understandable. I can definitely understand this. And the reason why I say that is because Aussie, when you go trans, you don't get the lifesteal from Devos, obviously. So people almost always go Aussie right after trans, because it gives them attack speed, pen, and lifesteal, which is the big one there. Bluestone Pendant, cutting the HP 5 in half from 20 to 10. To be fair, a tier 1 item, a starter item, so it's stronger than a tier 1 item, but a starter item That is an offensive item, giving you 15 power, and obviously the passive. Giving you 20 HP 5 is kind of nuts. That's 4 health a second. At level 1 through like level 5, that's a lot. I have in solo lane both won trades, like won early level 1 first bloods, and lost first bloods, simply based off of the HP 5 off of Bluestone. It is kind of frustrating. However, cutting it in half, I still think Bluestone is definitely good. It's just... its identity was like a regen item, and then the passive is just the icing on the cake. But then they gave it a crap ton of power, and the passive is pretty much what you come here for. Anyway, the power is just doubly effective, so the HP 5 and MP 5 could honestly not even be there, and it would still be good. But still, 10 isn't that bad for a tier 1 item. Bluestone Brooch. This damage is honestly not that much anyway. The real damage that comes from Bluestone is the 7.5% of the target's current health that stacks twice to being 15%, but that also has diminishing returns because every time it does damage, it takes their current health lower, so you're not actually ever getting 15%. You're getting the first 7.5% of their current health, and then you're getting something like 6%, and then that continually goes down. So this damage doesn't really do anything. I mean, it's decent. What I need to do, and this is a huge pet peeve, for items that say like this, oh, it deals 75 plus 7.5% of the target's current health. Right now, those two numbers are separate. Just combine them, please. It hurts my eyes seeing 4 different yellow numbers pop up when it's the same thing from the same item. Please. Now, this is another huge contention, especially from the pro scene. At least in my level of games, reinforced aren't really abused, and really the only major complaint is from solo laners, because in solo, the passive and the CCR just make you nigh unkillable. Really what they should have done is, again, back to my enhanced buff tangent. Instead of just bringing down what's good, and then keeping what's meh meh and keeping what's bad bad. For boots, it's a lot of the same issues. For physical and magicals, both the offensive boots are decent. In the case of physicals, you almost always want to go attack speed boots, but there are some arguments for characters going warrior tabi. But both the offensive boots are good. Reinforced greaves are really good. And then traveler shoes in Talaria are practically never purchased. So instead of just straight up nerfing what's really good, and only slightly, 10% CCR, I mean, okay, you're still a quarter of the way through CCR, and most items give 20% anyway. I do believe that this and Winged Blade giving 10% CCR, or not Winged Blade, Relic Dagger giving 10% CCR, are the only 2 items in the game that give 10%. Every other item gives 20%. So you're going to be pretty much capped with 1 item still anyway. If you still go boots, it's just a 10% less. It doesn't really mean anything. What I think they definitely should have done is they should have taken the CCR off of these boots entirely and put them on Talaria boots and Traveler shoes to bring more equilibrium to your boots choice. You want to be fast and agile and get out of CC faster? You go Talaria or Travelers. You want to just be straight up tankier earlier on in the game, you go Reinforced. And then offensive boots are offensive boots. You don't have to bring those into the equation. They do things completely differently. But yeah, this is still just odd. I mean, like, super duper early game, a 1 second stun goes from a 1 second stun to a 0.8 second stun is now a 0.9 second stun. Is that really gonna save lives at level 1? I mean, yes, or rather get you killed instead of saving you because it's going from 20 to 10. Very, very, very rarely. I think this is just an appeasement strategy to just get the top level players to shut up about reinforced greaves for a while. Honestly, I think that's what it is. Now, Persephone. Oh, I could make an entire video about Persephone. They butchered my girl. And butchered not in the way that people think. She is underwhelming. Yeah, feedback as her passive feeling underwhelming. Extremely. Her passive is worthless. There are 2 points to her passive. The gold gain to her passive is actually really good. It's decent. But the whole you can place plants while dead thing, but you can't see anyone? Like, that's just so bizarre. And the only reason they did that is because they couldn't think of any other way to keep the animation and the voice lines of Persephone dying but going, I'm not finished just yet, and her coming back to life, or I can't return to the underworld too quickly now, or I still have things to do, whatever the fuck she says. And then, like, being helped up by her skeleton boy toy, I'm forgetting the word, like helper guy who helps her back up. They wanted to keep the work hours for the people that worked hard on that animation, and obviously the voice lines that they paid for, but they couldn't think of anything that isn't her actually in her old passive doing damage. So they just kept it in the game and it's worthless. On top of that, her 1 feels terrible and only hits 1 god, and it's just really bad. But to compensate, everyone complained that her 2 was too easy, that it had no counterplay. Well, now they made it so that there is literally no counterplay and the plants never miss. And now they're realizing that, but they're only nerfing it by 10%. I'm sorry, when I'm level 8 with boots and like... Well, you wouldn't be level 8, you'd be more like level 10, 11. But when I have boots and like Rod of Tahuti or Karen's coin, I don't even have Rod, and I put my 2 down and I jump backwards into like a jungle corridor in between mid and the mid camps, and I hit the support and the jungler for literally 80% of both of their health with just boots and 1 item and my starter item, that is not okay. It's just absolutely fucking ridiculous. It's this was a failure. This Persephone rework was just a failure. Gilgamesh. I truly believe that Gilgamesh is mediocre before these nerfs. So, I mean, this is fine because people usually go Frostbind on them anyway, and the slow isn't why you come here for this. It's just the damage and the AA cancel. So, they can nerf this till the cows come home. They can make it a fucking 10% slow that scales up to 15%, and they can make it last 1 second. It doesn't matter. But this, jeez Louise, 15% scaling, man. Leave my man alone. It's fine. His kick doesn't do that much, unless he's fed as all hell and has more items than you, in which case his kick does close to 400 damage, but, I mean, it's also just a single target, and he also has to hit you into a wall. I don't know. This seems like people are complaining a lot because they're the ones getting kicked, and it feels kind of bad to get single target CC'd for a while and also take a lot of damage. So people whine about it a lot, but I mean, having him in a lot of my games and playing him quite a bit, well, not recently, but even before these nerfs, he didn't feel too particularly strong, and now this, I think he's honestly going to be on the weaker side, definitely, after these nerfs. King Arthur, his passive is honestly extremely undervalued. His passive is crazy good. When you hit enemy gods with abilities, you gain stacks. That give you a percent damage mitigation. So it's kind of like bad Osiris passive in a way, but since King Arthur has so many abilities, he just pretty much has this the entire time during a fight, whereas Osiris, after hitting 6 basic attacks, he loses it. Decreasing it by 30%, 6% to 4%. Seems alright. Honestly, I don't think King Arthur is that overtuned or strong. Being in a lot of Soul Laner chats, people are just tired of seeing him all the time because he's... Not because he's too strong, but because he's just a reliable pick. Like, if you get ganked, you're fairly safe, you have good 1v1 potential, you can't really get bullied out unless you heavily misplay or get camped. And then he's also decent in team fights, which not a lot of solo laners can say. A lot of solo laners specialize in 2 or 3 of those things, but then have really big weaknesses in one or the other. So I think this is appropriate. Heimdall. This is the one crit change that I mentioned. So if you didn't know, Heimdall's basics have built-in anti-crit, as in, instead of doing plus 100% crit damage, his basic attacks do only plus 70%. This is because if they did do plus 100%, his basic attacks would be off the fucking chain. They already do crit. He already crits the hardest of any god in the game, excluding critting on Naja final basic attack with or a character with Death's Temper or something like that. So that being said, they're also decreasing it by 5% again, which is a very slight change, but it's kind of a thing of Heimdall. That's why he attacks slower, is because he hits harder. And if he only hits ever so slightly harder, like 25% harder, with his regular basic attacks, hitting slower, especially late game, is not worth. ADCs already 3-shot other ADCs when you go crit. If he takes less, or if he takes more time to fire those same 3 basic attacks, he's just going to die. So in a crit, I don't think Heimdall, in a 1v1 scenario, nerfing it too much is the way, so I think this is alright. And then the Bifrost, I don't know why this is here. Bifrost seems totally fine. The base cooldown. Seems totally fine to me. I've never been inherently frustrated with Heimdall using his Bifrost correctly. The thing that makes Heimdall just so strong is he's incredibly strong with crit, and then as well as his ult is just amazing, and then his 2 is knock up. His self peel is crazy good, which I guess the Bifrost kind of touches on, but it's more a case of the knock up from his 2 and his ult mostly that do that. Ymir. Again, I can make a whole video on Ymir where people go from Ymir's completely, totally dead, worthless, nobody ever touch him except Raffer at Worlds, and then all of a sudden he is, no joke, in the span of a patch, people go from he's completely worthless, nobody play him, he's totally bad, you pick him, you're trolling, to people on Twitter and in streams literally going, oh my god, Ymir is the best character in the game. It is completely overreactionary. Ymir has still always had the same problems, and I'm glad they didn't go overboard. However, 2 seconds on wall is a little... To be fair, 8 second on wall, and the wall lasts 6 seconds. So you can pretty much have a near 100% uptime on the wall. It's 5 or 6 seconds. Diamond Ymir, by the way, and I haven't had that memorized. But nearly 100% uptime on the wall is pretty stupid. that shouldn't exist. I would honestly be fine if they just made it a 12-second cooldown flat. That probably makes more sense. Because this is honestly by far and away the best part of his kit, is his wall. That and probably his passive. Moving on her. I dislike this change heavily. They just nerfed him last patch. They nerfed the scaling on his 2 and his ult. Or the base damage on his ult, the scaling on his 2. Admittedly, very light changes. Like 40 base damage on his ult, which level 5 is pretty big. And then 5% scaling on his 2. But the reason why on her ult is like this, the reason why it's 75 seconds, I believe it's the second shortest, or the shortest ADC ult in the game, I believe, is because of that. His ult, in a 1v1 scenario, or say you have an Ymir walling and freezing people off, or an Athena taunt, and you ult into that, it's crazy, you'll be, oh my goodness, it's so awesome, it's amazing. But 80% of the time when you fire ult, you're either just using it for CC immunity, or you hit like 3 out of 8 spears. Because you're running away from 3 people getting ganked, and you turn around and whip it around and fire your spears in the general direction of your enemies. And this isn't just bad players not using his ult well, it's just how these kind of ults work. Like with Ra, for example, it's pretty much the exact same thing. The reason why his ult cooldown is so low is because it's honestly just not a very good ult unless you can spam it. And normalizing it with every other ADC ult in the game, that isn't like, I don't know, who has an amazing, Chernabog. I think Chernabog ult is 100 seconds, so it's not that different, but normalizing it, I don't know, I think that's kind of weird. I don't think Honor is that good, honestly. Well, I say not good. I don't think he's as good as people are complaining him to be. He's picked every game for similar reasons to Arthur. He's a very standard, reliable pick. It's not because he's overtuned or overpowered. He's just decent, and he's decent in any and all situations. He's a jack of all trades, ADC. And just normalizing him with a pretty hefty 15-second nerf is distasteful. Now, Athena. Reach is getting a nerf for some reason. The literal worst part of her kit by a mile is getting a nerf. I don't know why. 5% on both accounts. It's just kind of fucking crazy. I have no idea. The reason why Athena is strong is because she can dash taunt. I mean, nobody picked Athena forever, and then they gave taunt damage, and then everyone picked Athena. It made sense to pick her, say, in the jungle, because when you build full damage, having a third ability actually do damage means that you can actually do something, because with Athena, you almost never actually dash for damage, you just dash to get in range to taunt. So making that just have another ability just to do damage to proc item effects like Soul Reaver, like Soul Gem, anything like that was good for like full damage Athenas. That's why we saw such a huge meteoric rise of Athena jungles everywhere from whatever it's called, Collegiate League, SCL, whatever they call it, the minor league. I'm always calling it the minor league. I don't care what they change it to. From the minor league to ranked, from high level streams to casuals, I see a lot of Athena. Yeah, that made sense. But then people started picking her support and realized, hey, she's not dog water. She's actually been somewhat decent this whole time. Even though it was doing at level 9, because you really want to max Confound, especially that it does damage now. It did 1.2 second taunt, they nerfed that down to 1 second. It still taunts for 2 seconds at max rank, so that's always been the same. That's back reverted to before they made this do damage. Now people are complaining that she's overpowered because of her global ultimate? I mean, she's always had that, and people have said that she was completely fucking worthless. But we buffed something completely unrelated to that, and now it's, oh, she's completely broken, she can be all over the map at all times, which is false. It's just, the Smite community just is so reactionary and just emotional. I'll make a video about it, maybe soon, maybe like tomorrow or something, I don't know. But at rank 1, no change, 40 damage, and it only scales for like 25% or 30% of your magical powers, so it does no damage at early ranks. But 20 base damage, again, this doesn't really do anything. It's the fact that they target reach, of all things. It's just so fucking crazy. I don't know, it's just so weird. Anyway, that is the end of the bonus patch, which again is live in 5 days, June 1st. Also, the skin, probably for Chalk, I want to say. That would be a weird choice, given that Chalk just got a tier 5. So maybe Odin also just got a skin, but large weapon, I don't know. Guan Yu doesn't, I mean, the beard, I guess. Now that I think about it, it does look quite a bit like Guan Yu. Guan Yu hasn't got a really cool skin in a while. Yeah, anyway, looks kind of neat. Now we're moving on to the actual patch show. Now, I am skipping over Morgana. Also, I will say one thing about Morgan. It's quite weird how instead of calling her Morgana, they call her Morgan, which is extremely similar to Morrigan. Kind of weird how they could have chosen to differentiate the names a little bit more, but didn't. I guess, do they honestly believe people are going to say the Morgan every time they refer to her? No, they're not. Which is just a little weird, a little strange choice, but anyway. I will say, she fine, and her abilities look fucking cool. But, video not about her. I won't give my opinions on her until I actually see, like, item interactions and, cancels, that sort of shit. How good she is with cooldown and stuff. Now, quality of life. Fantastic. Be able to mute copyrighted music. If you stream, I know every streamer from Final K to Weekend to Incon are all thanking the heavens that this has been added. This honestly should have been added the second they put in non-Smite owned music. Like the second they put in those what was our first music themes from other people? Was it Avatar? Might have been Avatar. I don't know. Something like that. But the second we did that, we definitely should have had this in the game. That's just a no-brainer. It's kind of dumb. Pausing. Oh, thank God. Normal games can now be paused if and only if a player has disconnected. Thank fuck. Because honestly, in ranked, you could make the argument, ah, yes, an enemy player is DC'd, free TP for me. But in casuals, nobody cares about getting a free win, and it just sucks getting an auto loss. So just having this, just to make sure that that one person who, if they do reconnect in that minute, doesn't miss the first wave and completely fuck your lane for the rest of the game. Still, fantastic, love it. Also, an internal cooldown. Again, when they implemented pauses, this should have been a fucking thing to begin with, but better 2.5 years late than never, I guess. Fixing an issue where towers show immune text repeatedly. That happened when Chernobog ulted in the SPL, like every time. But I don't really watch Spectator because Spectator sucks, so this is just an SPL quality of life thing. Role trade. Fix an issue where duplicate roles could be awarded the same team. This happened, with no exaggeration, every single time I have ever traded roles since they implemented the ability to trade them. Uh, Come on, man. Again, at least they're getting fixed now. At least. Role queue. Keep role priority points even if the lobby fails to proceed. Again, this should have been the default. Free rewards, I don't care. Ranked, I don't care. Vine walls can now pass through player made walls. Now allow them to pass through the vine walls. Ganesh 3, Vamana alt, and Phantom are the only three I believe. Oh, and Osiris passive. I think that's all that affects. Fix an issue where foliage and trees are not hiding during aerial ultimates. I honestly haven't noticed this. I haven't really noticed any big difference with this. Both being ulted by aerial alts and ulting in aerial alts. Um, I when I first saw this changed in the patch showcase with like the Cthulhu ult, I was like, oh man, this changes everything. This is amazing, amazing quality of life. But I just haven't noticed it like ever. Gods, Athena, don't care. Yorm, never got alternate timeline. Don't get alternate timeline on Yorm. Honestly, unless you're building him full damage and you're getting like Sack Shroud, don't even play Yorm. Yorm is just not good right now. I mean, he's okay. He's just off my boy. He's my favorite character. Give him like more damage on his autos and like don't make him lose his pulse and movement speed on his 3 when he gets hit. Persephone, Bone Rush is not playing all its auto cues. Don't care. Bone Rush can sometimes not hit point blank targets. I did notice this quite a lot, actually. Infuriating. Same thing with her too. The plants will make the bite animation but won't do any damage. Or they'll just go right through a minion wave and just won't hit anything. And it fucking pisses me off. Effects and characters can still be semi-visible while Persephone is in her passive state. Oh, wow. Crazy. Now her useless passive is even more useless. Get into a strange state, which resets her items and levels and removes her abilities. Oh, wow. Okay. Her controllers... Oh, no. Help the controller people, I guess. Remember when Possessive was triggered. I'm just imagining someone playing Persephone and just their controller having an absolute spaz attack. Why does it even rumble when that happens? It's not some, like, epic thing. It's not a fucking Thorold. Like, what? It doesn't make any sense. This I actually have noticed. This has huge gameplay repercussions. Because Ra's Divine Light ability charges for, I believe, 2.4 seconds? So he had slow immunity that entire time. He had a mini sprint. He's supposed to only get it for half a second, the same as Kukulkan for his 2. So this is actually pretty big. Fixed an issue where Rat could buy boots. You would never want to buy boots anyway. One of the stats is worthless. So, okay. It's just dumb. It's just a dumb thing. Where Thanatos could get stuck in vine walls. Weird. Gilded Arrow. No longer mark god pets. Alright, sorry about that. Fixed an issue where it will no longer mark god pets. Weird that it ever did that to begin with, but okay. Fixed an issue where the ability did not mention in the text that triggers when rooted, because a root is technically a soft CC, which is just weird. Anyway, moving on. Arena map, who cares? Arena sucks. Joust. The new Joust map that they change seemingly every 2 years for some reason. Well, I know why, because it's the game's second most popular mode and whatnot. But every 2 years it gets a brand new map update, and they're just saying, fuck it, let's just go back to the original. People ask and cry for the original, let's give it to them. And I love it. It's mini Assault, and it's better. Phoenix defending is fun. I know, I'm gonna get eaten alive for that if anybody watches this. But I love the classic Joust map. What I think should happen is that the classic Joust map should be the 1v1 map. And then whatever they decide to do with the Chinese-themed map should be the 3v3. I think that's what they should do. Whatever. And it's just been updated to give current XP and gold rewards. And then red, instead of having the Bull Demon, which the map obviously lacks, red buff makes you do more damage to structures. Yeah. Which I think is good. It's all that it needs. It doesn't need a massive HP regen buff, which is just dumb. Benevolence fix. You can no longer purchase it at level 1 in Fountain, and then get the gold spool, and then sell it, and then get your actual items. You now actually have to leave the Fountain in order to actually get the gold per 5, which is very good. And I don't know why they didn't think of that to begin with. Now here's one of the controversial parts. Mask. The mask tree as a whole is seeing some love this patch. Some is doing a lot of carrying in that sentence. Doing a lot of heavy lifting. Yeah, masks. If you build a mask, you already know this before I say it, but you're trolling. You are in very, very few circumstances, Lono's mask makes sense, and in 2 circumstances, Rang does make sense. But Boomba's was good. I felt like it was in a good state when it was 15% minus damage and 15% damage taken increase. I felt like that it was fine. Not a lot of people built it, and people were complaining about people building full movement speed, but when you built full movement speed on anyone but tier, you were useless. You did no damage and you took a lot of damage. If they ever CC'd you, you just died. Sure, in casual games, when you build full movement speed, built, past tense, on Chronos, you ran around the entire map, but you just didn't do anything. Because you just hit less than every other character in the game, and it was just people whining. Again, see aforementioned comment about this is my community being extremely reactionary and emotional. But anyway, on to the actual masks themselves, on to the change. The tier 1 of the tree itself was underwhelming. I thought that was the entire point, because the 2 items give such different stats that you couldn't have the same stat on them, so they just had throwaway stats on the item, so you actually got something. And it was cheap as hell, so leaving base with Mask 1 might have been a thing, because it's only 500 gold. I mean, what else are you going to buy with 500 gold? You already have boots by this point, so I mean, you might as well, but no, not anymore. If they just doubled the stats like it said, and they kept the gold the same, it would still not be bought. But they're also increasing the price by like 40%. So, yeah, tier 1 is terrible. To put into perspective, practically all tier 1 in the games cap out at 700 gold, and actually give you at least 2 useful stats. For example, Glowing Emerald is 600 gold and gives 100 health and 10 HP 5. 100 mana doesn't do anything for you. 10 HP 5 is actually very useful. More useful than the 100 HP. And it's 100 gold cheaper than this. And it actually builds into useful fucking items. This entire tree needs to be reworked. Or just made to actually have a purpose. Rangdas. This is... Imagine Rangdas and Lonos being 2 plates of shit on them. Rangdas is the far more disgusting pile of crap. And I'll get into why. Lonos actually might have a place with some slight balance adjustments. Rangda's is completely worthless. The one main reason why. One, Lono's Mask, if you don't know, actually gives crazy stats. If you didn't have the passive on it and you made it like a tier 2 item, it would be crazy. It gives 40 of each protections. It gave 250 health. It now gives 30 of each protections. I can't remember now. Anyway, a decent amount of protections. 250, now 300 health, and 20% CCR. For like a middle of the line item, that's crazy, especially seeing as how this is only like what, 2200 gold, 2300 gold? That's pretty damn good. If they just made this like a tier 2, that would be crazy good. That would be amazing. But the problem comes with the passive. And then with Rangdas, you look at the stats of the item, it gives you 1. It gives you 1 stat. It is the only item in the entire game to give you a singular stat. It just gives you this. Or it's 2 numbers. Yeah, shut the fuck up. It's power for 2 different classes. So if you're physical, you get 60 power. You now get 70 power. You're magical, you get 120. Granted, 70 physical power is a lot, and 120 magical power is a very decent amount. It's just not enough, even compared to Lono's Mask, which is also terrible. Like, it's only good in a very, very few situations. Even with the change, it's just terrible. It only gives you 1 stat, and even then, if you're magical, it's like, why don't I just get Rod of Tahuti? Why don't I get Karen's Coin? Why don't I get Chronos Pendant? Why don't I get Bancroft's? Why don't I get literally any other item? If we're just looking at the item statistic, obviously mages can't get Rangdas. But the damage increase and take increase is 15%. The only 2 scenarios where you would ever get Rangdas would be if you're playing Yemoja mid, because you can stay at a distance and you build full damage Yemoja. I have yet to upload a video about that, but it can actually work, seeing how Yemoja does damage without power, and an increase of 15% with something like Sack Shroud would be absolutely crazy. And Yorm mid, similarly, building full damage, again with Yemoja full damage. Because Yorm, likewise, you can mitigate the damage increase taken because you're knock-up immune, so you can immune things like getting comboed off of things like that, or getting Baron pulled or something like that. And you can stay at range. You can just throw your ones out all game, and when a teamfight actually breaks out, you just immediately press 4 and go into your ult, which is actually a very good combination. Yorm is probably the only character in the entire game that can actually use Rangda's Mask and not it be completely troll. With Lono's Mask, there are more situations, but it's less good. See, like, for something like Aphrodite's support, you pick her to ult 1 person and to heal. This decreases your healing by 15%. I mean, okay, that's kind of the entire point. The entire reason why you pick a non-warrior guardian in support is for one of 2 reasons, and one of 2 reasons only. You do damage. Think Fenrir, Thor, Thanatos. You do damage. Scylla support, Isis support. You can secure camps. You get early pressure, which you would still get because Lono's you're not getting at level 1 through 10, doesn't matter. But because you do damage. If you pick this on, honestly, any form of support, like a Fenrir support, I mean, if they have 3 tanks in your tank Fenrir, then yeah, you're not going to do any damage. You might as well get Lono's Mask, but never underestimate Brutalize with just like an Anchile and Power Boots or Shifters. You do crazy amount of damage, even late game. And then the only option you would pick a non-Guardian Warrior in support is for healing. For utility, your Hells, your Aphrodites, your Barons. And this directly contradicts that, both at the same time. It's just weird. But if you pick this on something like Naja, where if you don't build power on Naja, you don't do damage anymore. They removed that aspect from the game, which is honestly very boring, but like, if you want to do that, I guess. But yeah, to be fair, this is a better change than what they did to Rangdas. This doesn't make any sense. It's the fact that it's this combined with the item gives you no stats. So that Rangdas sucks. Lono's has some applications. Like I listed, every character I listed could theoretically build Lono's mask. It's just not very good. You'd be better off building other items. But anyway, like I said, masks suck. I spent too much time on masks. They're just bad. They need a huge readjustment. Transcendence, 150 gold cheaper. It is now directly in line with Book of Thoth. This goes back to them not wanting to nerf crit, but buffing the trans start going into pen and attack speed with Odibo and Aussie and shit like that. And Chin Size and Titan's Bane. Uh, okay. I mean, this is definitely good. You're definitely going to see more Transcendence. Not even necessarily just from ADCs, but from junglers especially comes to mind. But maybe even solo laners. People do like damage in solo, but But yeah, you're going to see more trans. You're maybe going to see people deviate from crit, but not enough. Dust Toll, slightly better for magical characters. Okay. Direct Freya buff, I guess. Freya really benefits from this, but Dust Toll, not necessarily the 5 power buff, but doesn't really matter. It's giving 5% attack speed, irrelevant. Didn't lend itself well to magical carries who wanted to build towards that path quickly, an extra 5%. This from 10 to 15 is okay, it's just 5% carried over. Meh. Ring of Hecate, or Hecate, or Hecate, or Hecate. 100 gold cheaper, 10 more power. You don't get this item for the stats, though. You get this item specifically, well, for one stat, and then the passive. The 12% lifesteal is pretty good, which facilitates you are able to build full lifesteal, go into Bancroft's lifesteal boots, which are already better on magical characters anyway, and then into Typhons. And Ring of Hecate just really fits into that build really well. But, it's still just a not very good item. It's too much work, whereas other items give you immediate benefit. This is like a really shitty version of Ikavol. But yeah. It needs some more changes, I think. Vamp Shroud. Ooh, very nice. 50 gold cheaper and 5 more power. Pretty decent. Now, 5 power makes a lot more of a difference on Vamp Shroud than it does on Dust Toll, because Vamp Shroud is actually for ability-based characters. You buy this on characters that can make use of the passive, and can make use of the Sack Shroud. Still, I'll make another video about starter items, but Vamp Shroud and Sack Shroud exist. Blood Soaked doesn't exist in the game. Blood Soaked is fucking terrible. People only buy it when they're scared of taking 5% of your current health from Sack Shroud. But anyway, with the tier 1 of Vamp Shroud, pretty good. I like the buff. Athena. This is just going over the change that was happened in the bonus update. Still crazy how they're nerfing the weakest part of her kit, but keeping like her dash charge up speed the same. I think that would be an appropriate nerf, but no, they nerfed the weakest part of her kit to be even worse, which is just fucking weird. Pwash getting some tasteful buffs. This, a 10% increase to his cooldown. This isn't his problem. His problem is that he has, if you get some slows and some anti-heal and any sort of lockdown, from slows to roots to anything, he just fucking dies. He just dies. So, to easier facilitate that, he gets 50 health from level 1, which is, that's like a whole basic attack from a hunter. That's pretty good. As well as 4 Fizzprots. So this doesn't really help against gods too much. What this does help against early game is minions. So, fight a little bit more in the wave at level 1 and 2. Pwash those level 1-2 mid fights with the enemy mid jungler in the wave. If you get out cleared, you can like slightly take more damage, like a few more volleys from archers, which is, decent. But this definitely does not bring Pwash into the limelight. Artemis, 10 base damage. This does literally nothing. This doesn't help Artemis's clear that much. It's 10 damage. It's not like Artemis before was routinely, no matter what build you went, bringing archers to 1 HP and not killing them with her 3. And now this is suddenly going to fix that. No, this doesn't do anything. This is just a very, 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 very slight, the smallest change they can make to Artemis when she needs more. She needs a buff to her ult. She needs a buff to her trap. She needs consistency on her 2. Honestly, they should probably give small buffs to every single one of her abilities, but this is just a waste of time, honestly. Horus. The theme of very small incremental changes that we'll also get onto later. 5 units. However, this, I cannot tell you how many times I have been Horus chasing someone, catching up to them, and I use my 2, and I go into them, and I have my ruler enabled, as all of you should, and they're in the perfect sweet spot, but in between the 55 unit marker and me. I get that dash off, and they highlight because they're in the ability area, but then I just sort of put my head in their butt, and then just stand up again and go back to running, and it's like, oh, okay. That's disappointing. But 5 unit increase. Now that won't happen as often. It probably will still happen quite a lot, but it won't happen as often. So, decent. Also, the running joke that Horus's wings are ever so slightly getting incremental percentage increases is kind of funny. Ho Yi. Now, Artemis getting 10 damage on her 3 really doesn't mean anything. Ho Yi getting 10 damage on his 1, you would think, oh, it's the same amount of damage. In fact, it does less damage than her 3, and this is an AoE, this is a line. Surely, you're a hypocrite for saying that this has some impact, whereas this does not. This bounces. This hits up to 3 times. And not only that, on bounces on gods, each consecutive hit, I believe they take 30% increased damage, or 20%. I don't play Ho Yi that often. 20 or 30% increased damage on each successive hit. So this 10 turns to 13, turns to whatever 30% of 13 is. I'm not doing quick, easy math in my head. But even more important, at rank 1, well, you're not really doing that, but if you're good at lining up the triple shot, or if you start at purple, if you do the dragon start, this is a pretty decent buff, because that's an additional 30 damage on the purple buff when you get that triple bounce. So that is... I mean, I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. It's not that big of a deal, but hey, it's more significant than these 2 changes. Let's be honest. Izanami. Izanami's not that bad right now, especially since she works so well with crit. If you didn't know, her basic attacks actually deal either 110 or 120% of her basic attack power, as opposed to every other god doing, besides Heim, doing 100%. Because her forward swing does 70, and then her back swing does 40, I believe. They've changed it a couple times, but... So crit just exacerbates that difference if you hit both the swings. So being in a crit meta, Izanami should be more popular. I believe people are just having the stigma that Izanami was bad before, Izanami bad now, when not necessarily the case. But what is bad about Izanami is her 3 cooldown. 20 seconds... on a long post-fire, decently long, or long pre-fire, decently long post-fire jump that isn't even a particularly long distance, where you stealth, but she giggles like a fucking schoolgirl, and the entire lane knows exactly where she is after she lands in her jump. Being a 20-second cooldown, that's fucking crazy. Oh my goodness. They should just make it, honestly, like $16 ranks. That's just insane. And it's so insane that decreasing it by 3 seconds, honestly, isn't even enough. She's still going to be underplayed, probably. But anyway. Kumbhakarn. A 20 damage increase at level 1. You don't ever really get this ability at level 1. You get it at level 2, so makes it slightly less useful. But it's the same damage at rank 5. And do note, this is the initial hit. This is not the minion throwback. I believe the minion throwback deals 90 at rank 1, so... gods... No, the minion wave of Groggy Strike should feel more rewarding on its long channel time. I mean, Groggy Strike, you gave it 20 base damage. It's not that decent. But, yeah, If you go full damage Kumba's pretty good. And if you just run around and root and mez everyone, it's pretty good as well. But it's just that Kumba CC's one person for a really long time. And Blink Mez is admittedly really good. But his laning phase is really weak. His early game damage is abysmal. And his rank 1 yawn duration is also pretty bad. So He's a character designed to do damage, but his base numbers until you get late game on a Guardian are trash, and his scaling isn't that great. So I think what they should do is maybe increase his scaling or increase like his actual numbers in the early game a little bit, because like 90 on a 2-second channel is just not good. Mercury, 10 damage, means absolutely nothing. Technically, because you're going to be going I every game, it's 13 damage, or 13 point fucking 5, whatever, 35% increased damage to jungle camps. Uh, doesn't do anything. 10 damage at all ranks really doesn't do anything. Technically 20 because crit, but Merlin, a 1-second cooldown decrease. A lot of this to just say it goes on cooldown immediately when you cast it. It no longer flashes white and then goes on cooldown after it's done channeling. It channels for 2 seconds, I believe. Yeah, it channels for 2 seconds. So that's a once. Technically, it's a air quotes nerf, but these two things combined means just a 1-second cooldown decrease. A very slight buff. Very, very, very slight. Rom, 5% on his 3. That does nothing. And they buff his ult by 20 damage at max rank, but nothing at rank 5. I don't know. This seems like it does absolutely nothing. Rom should be pretty strong right now because he works really well with crit. But, this does nothing. And then Vulcan. Out of all the changes, this is the most pointless. This and the Athena reach nerf. This 10 base damage on a mage. This is even more useless than on Artemis 3 because mages, all their damage comes from scaling. I believe Magma Bomb has like a 70% scaling. So this 10 damage is even less useful than with Artemis. Yeah, and that's it. That's it for the patch notes. I've rambled on for a long time. I'm not talking about Morgan, or else I'll go even longer. Overall, no crit nerfs. Very slight buffs to alternate builds to crit. A lot of very, very, very questionable changes. Oh, I don't know about very, very, very. A lot of head scratchers that you go, I guess it won't change too many things, but like, I guess appeasement would be the number one thing for the bonus update in the patch notes. But anyway, I will make more videos like this in the future where I talk for a long time because I talk a lot, believe it or not, even though all my gameplay videos are of me not talking. Yeah, I think this patch, I'm not going to rank it out of 10. It's arbitrary and stupid, but all around harmless with a semi-concerned shrug. Didn't get a lot done. A lot of words to say very little. Like the Kumba, Mercury, Merlin, Rom, pretty much every god change that isn't like the Athena nerfs. Yeah, every god change that isn't like the Athena nerfs and maybe the Opwash level 1 stats are completely pointless. A lot of the item changes, like the Death's Toll, like the 5% attack speed, like the Vamp Shroud, 5 power, 50 gold, and that's somewhat decent, but mask changes, Rangdas is still the worst item in the game by a long shot. Lonos is not too far behind. And then some random shit. So yeah. If you like, I fully encourage you, if anybody watches this, I highly doubt it. My last patch notes that I updated for like the 6.3 update show like 3 years ago, actually did get some traction, for my channel. Got like 30 views, 20 views, something like that. So if anybody watches this, even if you skip through it and you just skip to the end, I encourage you to type away in the comments section. I check routinely the comments of all of my videos. And yeah, tell me what you think. Yeah, have a good day and be safe.